The unexpected. Bond Dr. Maya Chen had always believed that the universe held surprises in its darkest corners. As the head xenobiologist aboard Deep Space Research Station Harmony 7, she had encountered 17 different alien species, each with their own unique behaviors and social structures. But nothing had prepared her for what she discovered in the waste processing level on that quiet Tuesday morning. The distress calls had been faint, almost musical in nature. Most of the station's crew had dismissed them as equipment malfunction, but Maya's trained ear recognized something else entirely. These were vocalizations, desperate and young. Following the sound through the labyrinthine maintenance corridors, she found herself in the deepest level of the station, where the recycling systems hummed with mechanical precision. There, trapped, behind a collapsed energy barrier that had been hastily erected around a storage compartment, were 5 of the most beautiful and terrifying creatures Maya had ever encountered. Luminian cubs, each no larger than a Terran wolf pup, but possessing the characteristic crystalline fur that caught and refracted the dim emergency lighting into prismatic rainbows. Their eyes, large and luminous, held an intelligence that seemed far beyond their apparent age. Luminians were legendary throughout the galaxy for their fierce pack loyalty and aggressive territorial nature. Adult Luminians stood 8 feet tall, possessed natural armor plating, and could generate bioelectric fields strong enough to disable most technology. Their species had never been successfully domesticated, studied up close, or even approached without violence. Yet here were 5 cubs, trapped and abandoned, calling out in what Maya's heart recognized as fear and loneliness. The energy barrier flickered intermittently, clearly damaged and failing. Maya quickly assessed the situation with her scientific training. The containment field was losing power, but its random energy fluctuations made it dangerous to approach. The cubs seemed aware of this, pressing themselves against the far wall of their improvised prison. Maya knelt down several feet away from the barrier and began speaking in soft, measured tones. She had learned from her years of animal research that tone mattered more than words when dealing with frightened creatures. The cubs' ears, pointed and mobile like those of terrestrial wolves, swiveled toward her voice. Their crystalline fur, which had been standing on end in defensive postures, began to settle. "Hello, little ones," Maya whispered, her voice carrying the gentle authority she had perfected during her doctorate work with Earth's most skittish species. "I know you're scared. I know this place is strange and cold, but I'm here to help." One cub, slightly larger than the others and bearing a distinctive silver marking across its forehead, approached the failing barrier cautiously. Its eyes met Maya's, and she felt something extraordinary pass between them. Not telepathy, as she had read about in some species, but something more fundamental: recognition, understanding, trust. Maya spent the next 3 hours carefully dismantling the energy barrier. She explained each step of her process to the cubs, showing them her tools, letting them observe her hands and intentions. Remarkably, they seemed to understand. When she needed to access the power coupling on their side of the barrier, the silver-marked cub actually helped, using its small claws to manipulate components that Maya's fingers were too large to reach. When the barrier finally collapsed, Maya expected the cubs to flee. Instead, they approached her cautiously, the silver-marked one leading the way. They sniffed her hands, examined her equipment, and seemed to come to a collective decision. From that moment forward, they simply stayed with her. The first indication of trouble came 6 hours later when Maya returned to her laboratory. The cubs had followed her through the station corridors in a neat formation, drawing stares and causing several alien crew members to activate emergency protocols. Maya's communication device buzzed with increasing urgency as reports flooded in about dangerous predators loose on the station. Commander Zektar, the station's Vorthak commanding officer, appeared in Maya's lab doorway within minutes. His reptilian features were set in what Maya had learned to recognize as barely controlled alarm. The 7-foot-tall alien scales had shifted to a deep red coloration, indicating high stress levels. "Dr. Chen." His voice carried the authoritative rumble that had earned him command of one of the galaxy's most important research stations. "Explain the presence of these creatures immediately." The 5 cubs had arranged themselves in a protective semicircle around Maya's workstation. Their postures were alert but not aggressive, and Maya noticed that their crystalline fur was glowing with a soft, warm light, rather than the harsh, defensive brightness she had read about in hostile Luminians. "They're Luminian cubs, Commander," Maya replied calmly, not pausing in her work of preparing nutritional supplements that she hoped would be compatible with their physiology. "I found them trapped in the lower levels. They were abandoned." "Abandoned?" Commander Zektar's head tilted in the Vorthak expression of confusion. "Luminians never abandon their young. Their pack bonds are considered unbreakable." "Security Chief." Nyx materialized in the doorway behind the commander, her forearms carrying various scanning devices and what Maya recognized as a containment field generator. The Calarian's compound eyes swept the room, calculating threat levels with the precision that had made her species the galaxy's premier security specialists. "Sir." Nyx's voice carried the clicking undertones of her native language. "These creatures pose a significant threat to station personnel. Luminian cubs are known to be more unpredictable than adults. I recommend immediate containment." The silver-marked cub looked up at Maya and made a sound that her translation software couldn't interpret. It sounded almost like a question, and Maya found herself responding instinctively. "No, little one, no more containment, no more cages." She looked directly at Commander Zektar. "These cubs have chosen to stay with me. I won't allow them to be imprisoned again." "Chosen?" Security Chief Nyx's antennae twitched with what Maya had learned indicated skepticism. "Dr. Chen, with respect, Luminian neural development doesn't allow for complex choice-making at this age. They operate on instinct and pack programming." Maya stood slowly, and the cubs immediately adjusted their positions to maintain their protective formation around her. The movement was fluid, coordinated, but Maya noticed something that the security officers had missed. The cubs weren't protecting her from external threats. They were including her in their pack structure. "That's where you're wrong," Maya said, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had spent years challenging scientific orthodoxy. "These cubs aren't operating on standard Luminian pack dynamics. They're different." She activated her workstation's holographic display, showing the bioscan data she had been collecting. "Look at these neural pattern readings. The standard Luminian brain shows distinct development phases: instinctual response, pack hierarchy, recognition, and eventually complex reasoning. But these cubs show advanced development in areas that shouldn't emerge for several more years." Commander Zektar studied the data with the keen intelligence that had earned him his position. His scales gradually shifted from red to a more neutral brown as his stress levels decreased. "These patterns are unprecedented. More than that," Maya continued, "they show empathic development far beyond anything documented in Luminian studies. These cubs can sense emotions, intentions, even complex psychological states. That's why they were abandoned." Security Chief Nyx lowered her containment device slightly. "Explain." Maya knelt down, and the silver-marked cub approached immediately, allowing her to examine its cranial structure. "In traditional Luminian society, strength comes from aggression and dominance. A pack member who can sense fear, doubt, or weakness in their packmates would be seen as a liability. These cubs were abandoned because their empathic abilities make them defective by Luminian standards." The cub looked up at Maya with those luminous eyes, and she felt again that sense of connection, of understanding that transcended species barriers. But that's exactly what makes them remarkable. They don't follow me out of instinct or fear. They choose to be with me because they can sense that I genuinely care about their well-being. As if to demonstrate her point, the other 4 cubs approached, each one touching Maya's hands or arms with their small paws. Their crystalline fur glowed with that same warm, peaceful light, and Maya could swear she felt their contentment and trust. Commander Zektar's scales continued to shift color as he processed this information. "Dr. Chen, if these cubs possess advanced empathic abilities, they represent a significant scientific discovery, but they also represent a significant problem." Maya looked up from where she knelt, surrounded by the cubs. "What kind of problem?" Security Chief Nix activated her communication device, and the main display showed incoming vessel signatures on the edge of the system. The kind that comes in, the form of a Luminian warpack. 3 vessels, heavily armed, demanding the return of their stolen property. The Cub's fur immediately shifted from warm gold to a defensive silver-white, and they pressed closer to Maya. The silver-marked Cub made a sound that Maya's translator finally recognized. It was fear, but not fear of the approaching ships. It was fear of being taken away from the one being who had shown them kindness. Maya stood, her jaw set with the determination that had carried her through years of academic challenges and professional obstacles. They're not property. They're individuals with the right to choose their own path. Dr. Chen, Commander Zektar's voice carried a warning tone. The approaching vessels belong to Pac Alpha Sventar, one of the most aggressive Luminian commanders in known space. He's not coming here to negotiate. Maya looked down at the 5 Cubs who had chosen to trust her, their luminous eyes reflecting both hope and fear. In that moment, she made a decision that would change not just her life, but the course of interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. Then we'd better be ready to show him what real strength looks like. The test of understanding. The arrival of the Luminian warship sent Harmony 7 into controlled chaos. Maya watched from the observation deck as 3 massive vessels materialized. Out of hyperspace, their biomechanical hulls gleaming with the same crystalline properties as their crew's fur. Each ship was easily 3 times the size of the research station, bristling with weapons that could reduce Harmony 7 to scattered debris in minutes. The 5 Cubs pressed against Maya's legs, their fur now displaying complex patterns of silver and gold that Maya was beginning to understand represented emotional states. The silver-marked Cub, whom Maya had privately begun calling Echo due to its habit of repeating her movements, looked up at her with trust that both warmed and terrified. Her commander Zektar's voice echoed through the station's communication system. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, all personnel to emergency stations. Maya's personal communicator chirped with an incoming message. Security Chief Nix's voice carried urgency and something Maya had never heard. From the usually composed Calarian, fear. Dr. Chen, report to Conference Room Alpha immediately. The Luminian Pac Alpha is demanding your presence for immediate negotiations. Maya looked down at the Cubs who had been following her for 3 days now. In that time, she had learned to read their emotional displays, understand their simple but expressive vocalizations, and most importantly, recognize their individual personalities. Echo was the natural leader, brave and curious. A smaller female, with distinctive blue markings whom Maya called Prism, was the group's problem solver. The others, Storm, Ember, and Little Dawn, each had their own unique traits and abilities. Come on, little ones, Maya said softly. It's time to show them what we're really made of. The Cubs formed their usual protective formation around Maya as they made their way through the station corridors. Crew members pressed against the walls to let them pass, their various species expressions ranging from awe to terror. Maya kept her stride confident and calm, knowing that the Cubs could sense her emotional state and would respond accordingly. Conference Room Alpha had been designed to accommodate representatives from multiple species, with adjustable atmospheric controls and varied seating arrangements. Today it felt more like a war room. Commander Zektar stood at the head of the table, his scales a deep, worried brown. Security Chief Nix had positioned herself near the entrance, all 4 arms resting, near her various weapons. On the main display screen, a massive figure dominated the view. Pac Alpha Sventar was everything Maya had read about Luminian leadership taken to an extreme. Standing nearly 9 feet tall, his crystalline fur was a deep, aggressive red that seemed to pulse with barely contained violence. Scars marked his face and arms, each one a testament to battles won through strength and brutality. Human, his voice rumbled through the speakers with predatory intensity. You will return our defective offspring immediately. They are Pac property, and their theft will not be tolerated. Maya stepped forward, the Cubs maintaining their formation around her. She noticed that their fur patterns had shifted again, now displaying the defensive silver-white she had learned. Indicated protection mode, but with underlying threads of gold that suggested they weren't merely afraid. Pack Alpha Sventar, Maya replied, her voice carrying the professional authority she had developed through years of presenting research to skeptical academics. These cubs were abandoned, trapped, and left to die. I rescued them. They are not property. They are individuals with the right to choose their own path. The Pack Alpha's fur shifted to a deeper, more aggressive red. Choose. You speak ignorance, human. Luminian cubs do not choose. They obey pack hierarchy until they are strong enough to challenge for leadership. These defects were cast out because they lack the strength necessary for pack survival. Echo, the silver-marked cub, stepped forward slightly and made a sound that Maya's translator couldn't interpret, but Maya was beginning to understand that the cubs communicated on levels beyond simple vocalization. She could sense Echo's determination, his protective instincts, and something else, a strength that had nothing to do with physical power. You're wrong, Maya said, kneeling down to place her hand on Echo's head. These cubs aren't defective, they're evolved. They possess empathic abilities that allow them to form bonds based on trust and mutual respect, rather than fear and dominance. Pack Alpha Sventar's image leaned forward on the screen, his massive form radiating menace. Empathy is weakness. Trust without strength is vulnerability. You humans understand nothing of survival. Maya stood and the cubs immediately adjusted their positions. But instead of the defensive formation they had maintained, they spread out slightly, each one taking a position that allowed them to watch both the screen and the room's entrances. Maya realized they were protecting not just her, but everyone in the room. Survival isn't just about physical strength, Pack Alpha. It's about adaptation, cooperation, and the ability to form alliances that make the whole stronger than the sum of its parts. Commander Zektar stepped forward, his diplomatic training evident in his careful tone. Pack Alpha Sventar, Dr. Chen's research suggests these cubs represent a significant evolutionary development in your species. Perhaps we could discuss this matter with scientific objectivity. The Pack Alpha's response was a snarl that needed no translation. There will be no discussion. Return our property or face the consequences. You have 1 standard hour. The screen went black, leaving the conference room in tense silence. Security Chief Nix's compound eyes were already calculating defensive strategies while Commander Zektar considered diplomatic options. Maya looked down at the 5 cubs who had chosen to trust her with their lives. Their fur patterns had shifted again, now displaying complex spirals of silver, gold, and blue that pulsed with determination. They weren't afraid. They were resolute. I won't let them take you, Maya whispered to the cubs. I promise. Echo approached her and gently touched her hand with his small paw. Through that contact, Maya felt something extraordinary. Not just the cub's trust and affection, but also his strength. Not the brutal physical power that Pack Alpha Sventar valued, but the quiet, unshakable strength that came from knowing. He was loved and valued for who he was, not what others expected him to be. 45 minutes later, Pack Alpha Sventar materialized on Harmony 7's main docking bay. He had come alone, which Maya recognized as both a show of contempt for the station's defenses and a demonstration of absolute confidence in his own abilities. The Pack Alpha's presence filled the docking bay with predatory menace, his crystalline fur now a deep, battle-ready crimson. Maya stood waiting for him, the 5 cubs arranged around her in their protective formation. She had refused Commander Zektar's offer of security escorts, knowing that any show of external force would only confirm the Pack Alpha's belief that humans understood only weakness and fear. Human, Pack Alpha Sventar's voice echoed through the docking bay. Return the defects and your death will be swift. Instead of responding with words, Maya knelt down and placed her hands on Echo's head. The silver-marked cub looked up at her with those luminous eyes, and Maya felt again that extraordinary connection. Trust, understanding, and choice freely given. Echo, she said softly. You and your siblings have a choice to make. You can return to a pack that values only strength and aggression, or you can choose a different path. But the choice must be yours. Pack Alpha Sventar laughed, a sound like grinding stone. You speak of choice to creatures who know only instinct and hierarchy. Watch as they return to their proper place in the pack order. The Pack Alpha raised himself to his full height and released a dominance display that Maya had read about but never witnessed. His crystalline fur blazed with aggressive energy, and he emitted a subsonic growl that was designed to trigger submission responses in any Luminian within hearing range. Maya watched in fascination as the cub's response defied every piece of scientific literature she had ever read about the species. Instead of cowering or immediately submitting, they formed a tighter protective circle around Maya. Their fur shifted to a brilliant gold shot through with silver threads, and they responded to the Pack Alpha's dominance display with vocalizations that sounded almost like challenge calls. Echo stepped forward, his small form dwarfed by the massive Pack Alpha but somehow not diminished by the size difference. The young cub's fur blazed with patterns that Maya was beginning to understand represented not just defiance, but a completely different understanding of what strength meant. Pack Alpha. Sventar's expression shifted from confidence to confusion, to something approaching shock. Impossible. Cubs cannot resist pack dominance commands. They're not resisting, Maya said, standing and moving to Echo's side. They're making a choice based on their own understanding of where they belong. Prism, the blue-marked female, approached the Pack Alpha with curious boldness. Maya held her breath as the tiny cub examined the massive warrior with the same fearless curiosity she had shown when exploring Maya's laboratory equipment. The Pack Alpha's fur flickered between aggressive red and confused brown as he encountered behavior patterns his worldview couldn't explain. You see, Maya continued, these cubs don't follow commands because they have to. They stay with me because they choose to. They protect me not out of programmed loyalty, but because they genuinely care about my well-being. That's not weakness, Pack Alpha. That's evolution. Storm, Ember, and Dawn joined their siblings in what Maya realized was not a defensive formation at all, but an invitation. The cubs were including both Maya and the Pack Alpha in their circle, demonstrating the same inclusive behavior that had first drawn them to Maya in the abandoned maintenance corridors. Pack Alpha Sventar's massive form seemed to shrink slightly as he processed what he was witnessing. His fur patterns shifted through colors Maya had never seen documented in Luminian literature. Uncertainty, wonder, and something that might have been hope. This is unprecedented, he rumbled, his voice losing some of its aggressive edge. How do you command such loyalty without dominance displays? Maya smiled, the same expression that had gotten her through countless academic challenges. I don't command it, Pack Alpha. I earn it. Every day, through trust, respect, and genuine care for their individual needs and personalities. Echo approached the Pack Alpha and, in a gesture that defied millions of years of Luminian evolutionary programming, gently touched the massive warrior's paw with his own tiny one. Through that contact, Maya realized, Echo was sharing the same empathic connection that had first drawn him to her. Trust, understanding, and the security that came from being valued for who he was, rather than what others expected him to be. Pack Alpha Sventar's fur shifted to a pattern Maya had never seen before. Deep gold shot through with silver threads that seemed to pulse with emotional resonance. When he looked up at Maya, his eyes held a recognition that transcended species boundaries. Human Maya Chen, he said formally, you have shown these cubs a strength that our pack traditions do not recognize. But perhaps our traditions have overlooked something important. The Pack Alpha knelt down to the cub's level, his massive form making the gesture even more significant. One by one, each cub approached him, not with the submission their species hierarchy demanded, but with the same curious trust they had shown Maya. Through those contacts, Maya realized the Pack Alpha was experiencing something no Luminian leader had ever encountered: connection without conquest, loyalty without fear, strength without violence. Dr. Maya Chen, Pack Alpha Sventar said as he stood, I formally request that you and these cubs join our pack structure, not as subordinates but as teachers. My species has much to learn about the strength that comes from choice rather than compulsion. Maya looked down at Echo, who was practically glowing with joy and pride. The silver-marked cub looked up at her with those luminous eyes, and Maya felt their connection stronger than ever, built not on species loyalty or programmed behavior, but on mutual respect, genuine affection, and the revolutionary understanding that true strength came from choosing to care for others. Pack Alpha Sventar, Maya said, extending her hand in the human gesture of partnership. I think that sounds like the beginning of something extraordinary. As the massive Luminian grasped her hand with gentle care, Maya realized that the cubs had been right all along. They hadn't been following her, and they hadn't simply chosen her. They had recognized in her something that their own species was only beginning to understand, that the strongest bonds weren't forged through dominance and fear, but through respect, trust, and the revolutionary idea that everyone, regardless of species or size, deserved to be valued for who they truly were.